Good morning to everyone. My name is Anushka Cholakath, and today I will be presenting on the Hospital End Use Market Study project. So let's go ahead and get started. All right. So for the agenda today, we'll discuss the project objectives, which include the literature review, the survey tool we use to facilitate the site visits and interviews. We'll go over some barriers, followed by the recommendations and conclusion. So there were a few key objectives for this market study. The first was to conduct a literature review on hospital energy efficiency guides, looking into journals, case studies, as well as investigating prior program participation data, including statewide deemed measures for hospitals in California. Another objective of the study was to obtain to conduct hospital site visits and gather data on current hospital gas appliances and obtain feedback from hospital facility managers on different types of barriers and drivers that they face. And finally, the goal was to provide IOUs with updated market data and recommendations based on the findings of these site visits and interviews. So for the literature review, we focused on a few key topics to help understand different hospital needs and help facilitate the hospital site visit conversations towards the later half of this market study. So for some of the topics, we looked into the ASHRAE Hospital Energy Efficiency Design Guidelines. We reviewed statewide deemed measures for hospitals, prior program data, hospital codes and standards in California, as well as any barriers we found from a literature review of journals and case studies. So for the ASHRAE Hospital Energy Guide manuals, the goal of this was to just help to review these energy guide manuals to better understand the different hospital energy demands and best practices for end-use equipment. Overall, there was a lot of focus on water heating, space heating, and commercial cooking equipment needs for optimizing gas savings and improving efficiency across hospitals. Essentially, for each type of equipment, ASHRAE had efficiency recommendations, how-to guidelines, and a lot of their recommendations and suggestions were generally supported by the deemed measure offerings, which I'll go over next. So like I'd mentioned, during the literature review phase, we used CEDARS to find program participation data from the past 3 years. We also referenced the ETRM to search for hospital statewide deemed measures, and a list of the applicable measures is provided on the table on the right. And I'll go into some more detail on each of these in the next slide. So this table essentially shows the sum of the number of yearly projects associated with each measure offering from 2020 to 2022. Just wanted to note that when we conducted this literature review, the 2023 data set was not yet available. The number of energy efficiency projects was a lot lower in 2020 due to the pandemic, but has since picked up over the years, picked back up in 2022. From this table, we found that the deemed measures with the greatest number of yearly projects in total were commercial oven and tankless water heating equipment. So this graph shows the yearly net therm savings for each measure. A majority of the savings we found came from water heating, space heating. Laminar flow restrictors also had some uptake, and followed by commercial food service projects, which had fewer projects and therefore fewer savings to report. Also wanted to note that the delivery type for these measures were upstream deemed. And this is important to note for later on during the hospital site visits, where we found that not a lot of facility leaders were aware of these measure offerings, given that with upstream deemed measures, the manufacturers are oftentimes the entity in which the program implementer partners with, and not necessarily the end use customer, which kind of explains why a lot of the facility managers were not too aware. Other patterns that we saw here were that tankless water heaters were adopted a lot more than storage water heaters, and convection ovens more so than combination ovens. We also noticed at this phase that there weren't any measures associated with dryers. Given that there are a lot of patient beds and housekeeping needs in hospitals, this was another potential measure opportunity we looked into. We found that there was a gas dryer valve measure that is available and could be used by hospitals. However, later site visits confirmed that a lot of hospitals ended up transitioning to off-site laundry facilities. So another portion of the literature review focused on hospital codes and standards. HCAI, which was formerly known as OSHPD, provides codes and standards requirements for hospitals. And we'll go into a lot more detail on HCAI since this was brought up quite a bit during the interviews with the hospital facility managers. Additionally, Title 24 and different air quality regulations also played a role in what hospitals can or cannot do, but we found that HCAI is oftentimes stricter and can impose many limits on hospital construction and equipment retrofits. We also found that HCAI is pretty influential when it comes to hospital measures. And an example of this is the laminar flow faucet measure, which was designed specifically for healthcare use to address HCAI requirements. So as an entity, they have a lot of influence within hospitals. These are just some common barriers that we found during the literature review, looking at a case study for hospitals in San Diego. And what's interesting is that the findings here were very similar to the findings from talking to the hospital facility managers at the interview stage of this market study. So some of the key barriers here were low economic incentives, structural operational barriers, regulatory barriers, a lack of top-down pressure, and insufficient staffing capacity. So a survey tool was also developed as part of this market study and was used to later on facilitate the site visits and interviews with the hospital facility managers. This survey tool had questions regarding the general hospital building. We were also trying to collect data on gas appliances. So some of the questions consisted of the appliance age, the manufacturer, how often that appliance was used, maintenance schedules if known, any major retrofits and appliance problems. We also asked a series of questions on program participation and questions on drivers and barriers. So now we'll get into the bulk of the market study, which was the site visits and the interview summaries. So just to preface this, we spent a considerable amount of time screening different hospitals to identify willing facilities and engineering managers that would be willing to participate in this study. So that entailed calling hospitals all across California multiple times. It was a bit of a challenge because many hospitals did not want to share information, and a lot of them required corporate approval to proceed. Initially, we were able to get in touch with around 15 hospital engineering managers or directors who had initially agreed to do a site visit. And then after several months of back and forth, we ended up completing 3 site visits for this study. Also wanted to note we interviewed 2 other individuals as subject matter experts for this market study. One of those individuals was a former facilities director at a major healthcare group, and that individual had worked for many hospitals as in the role of a facilities director. The other individual was a facilities and engineering consultant for a major university healthcare system, and they were able to provide some feedback as well. So for the 3 hospitals that we were able to visit, this table just summarizes the building data. As you can see, all of these hospitals are 50+ years old, so we were not able to get any newer hospitals to agree to participate in this market study, so our data set is quite limited here. And then for the next several slides, I've just summarized the major gas equipment used in each hospitals. So starting with the boilers, each hospital had multiple boilers here to meet their building's needs. All of the boilers here are past their DEER recommended effective useful life. The engineering and facility managers have indicated that their boilers have been through a series of many repairs and are constantly they're constantly needing to be upgraded and repaired, and they would rather go through that than purchase a new a boiler. And then so for water heating, we noticed that all of the water heaters at these hospitals were storage water heaters. Something that was interesting to note was that the hot water set points varied considerably across the water heaters, and none of them really followed the ASHRAE recommended set point for hospitals, which was around 120 degrees Fahrenheit. One of the facilities consultants that we interviewed pointed out that the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, does a lot of quality work with hospitals, and they oftentimes have different temperature requirements and regulations for different regions in the hospital. So hand washing regions versus, the commercial food service area and patient care regions had different requirements. And that was a possible explanation on their end as to why ASHRAE guidelines are sometimes not always able to be followed for efficiency purposes, just given the requirements that other regulatory agents have, which supersede that. So for commercial food service equipment, all of these hospitals had a big commercial kitchen attached to the facility. We mainly looked into ovens, fryers, and gas cooktops. All of the facility managers stated that these appliances operate anywhere between 12 to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so they're heavily used. The facility managers did not really have any major concerns about their food service equipment or its energy use. But again, most of these appliances here are dated or soon to be past its effective useful life. So just pointing out that there's definitely an opportunity to upgrade to more efficient equipment in the coming years, as is the case with the water heaters and boilers. So as I mentioned earlier, a portion of the survey was intended to gather information on the hospital's participation in prior energy efficiency programs. And again, this was a small sample of hospitals, so it's hard to generalize this across California, but I will go through the key responses here from the interviews. So a lot of the facility managers answered no on the survey regarding if they had participated in any of these energy efficiency programs for gas appliances. One facility leader remembered being contacted by Edison, but they never ended up pursuing anything further. None of the facility managers we interviewed recalled being approached by a gas IOU. Another manager stated that the hospital was never contacted for any type of program participation, and they were not aware of deemed measures for hospital and what that entailed. And only one hospital manager remembered participating in an energy efficiency program. However, this was for a water savings program. So overall, what we found was that there was just a lack of awareness at the leadership level regarding these programs for hospitals. So another component of the survey was to better understand hospital barriers and drivers. All 5 individuals were asked the same survey question, and their responses were recorded using a 5-point Likert scaling system to maintain consistency here. And the scaling system was designed based on the importance of the specific driver or the barrier in question. So I'll just go over each question and the average response from the facility managers. So question number 1 was, how much of a driver is it for the end user to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? The answers sort of varied, but the mean was a 3.6, so a decent driver. Question number 2, how much of a driver is performance improvement for the end user? This was a significant driver. The mean was a 4.4. Question 3, how much of a driver is gas savings? Again, a significant driver, 4.4. Question number 4, how much of a concern is their gas bill? Some had it as a 2, some had it as a 4. The average response was a 2.8. Question number 5, on a scale of 1 to 5, how interested was the hospital in upgrading appliances to more efficient ones? And this was the mean was a 4.8, so hospitals were definitely interested in pursuing upgrades. Question number 6, how much of a barrier is HCI to implementing energy efficiency measures? And the average response was a 4. Question number 7, how much of a barrier is the hospital's allocated engineering budget? Had a variety of responses. The average was a 3.4. Question number 8, how much of a barrier is the lack of maintenance personnel training? Not a significant barrier here. This was had a mean response of 2.8. Question 9, how much of a barrier is the uncertainty of newer technology performance by the end user? This was, again, not a significant barrier. The mean was a 2. Question number 10 was, how much of a market barrier is the incompatibility with existing systems for adopting newer energy efficient gas equipment? This was a 1.8 as a mean response. Question 11, how much of a barrier is the uncertainty of future codes and standards? This one had interesting responses. It was either a 5, a significant barrier, or a 1. So the mean was a 3.4. Question 12, how much of a barrier is the lack of awareness of new energy efficiency appliances among hospital facilities, the hospital facilities team and engineers? And again, this had some varying responses, but the mean was a 2.8. And at the end of the survey, a lot of the facility leaders elaborated a little bit more on some of these barriers and drivers that were of importance to their respective hospitals. So I will just go over in a little more detail about that in the next slides. So starting off with HCI, multiple facility directors have indicated that the HCI process can be extremely difficult, and they've faced permitting issues in the past. Some of the facilities directors stated that even the simplest forms of equipment changes needed to be handled through HCI. And in the case of a few hospitals, sometimes the minimum amount of time it would take to get emergency approval for permits in a situation where a gas appliance has failed has taken upwards of 6 months. Facility leaders have also noted that it's oftentimes easier to just put up with older equipment, even though it has a series of problems and constantly needs to be repaired, than go through the HCI process for purchasing a new appliance. Another facilities expert indicated that dealing with HCI has just been challenging for their hospital, especially when it is a significant structural issue related to the appliance replacement, such as, room dimensions, lack of space, or if it's a newer technology or product that hasn't been approved yet. Some of the facility leaders have also cited the newer seismic regulations as a significant barrier. And this was also brought up during the literature review during a case study looking into hospitals in San Diego. So there were some similarities there. Some examples of this were, bigger equipment such as storage water heaters with larger capacities needed a lot more anchoring to meet current seismic standards. And oftentimes this would just cause the hospital to incur more expenses related to the equipment than just the equipment replacement itself. So this leads to cost being another issue for a lot of these hospitals. The next big barrier here was the corporate and regulatory guidelines. Hospital experts cited the California Department of Public Health, the CDPH, the Centers for Medicare Medicaid Services, CMS, Joint Commission, and the different air quality districts and just various regulations associated with some of these organizations as a major barrier for changing gas equipment. During these interviews, some of the hospital managers pointed out that they're oftentimes not eligible for certain rebates, just given the conflicting appliance parameters that these organizations would have. So, for example, CMS had different requirements for water heating when it comes to, washing dishes versus washing hands in patient care areas, and these often varied from rebate requirements. So just different conflicting parameters here was a big barrier. Another significant barrier was leadership within hospitals. All of the hospital managers we interviewed cited hospital politics and management decisions as a major barrier when it comes to choosing equipment, surprisingly, especially in the food service area within hospitals. Some of the facility managers we interviewed indicated a significant disconnect between the commercial food service area managers and the rest of the hospital engineers and facilities department. And an example was, when coordinating food service equipment, food service leaders would prefer certain vendors and equipment over ones that would actually save the hospital money and be more efficient. So overall, poor leadership was just cited. Sorry, I think someone may be unmuted. All right, but yeah, as I was saying, poor leadership was just cited as a barrier among these hospitals. And finally, the engineering budget for purchasing new equipment. Some of the facility managers we spoke to expressed that the engineering departments tend to run quite lean and have high turnover rates. There was also a significant difference in the budget for energy efficiency projects, just given the healthcare system the hospital was in. So we found that certain healthcare groups, especially hospitals belonging to university systems, had larger budgets for new equipment, whereas other facilities who belonged, who were mainly, community hospitals that served lower income customers, claimed that their budget was a huge concern to them. Some of the other feedback that we received was that the cost for replacing equipment in hospitals are roughly 8 to 10 times greater than what it would cost at a residential or a commercial facility, just given the lengthy bureaucratic requirements and costly permitting processes, which, again, in addition to that and cost, was a significant barrier for a lot of these hospitals. Another interesting point that was brought up was facility managers expressed that hospital management would prioritize their appliance budgets on purchasing and fixing equipment directly used in healthcare services. So what they mean by that is they would rather buy newer and more X-ray machines or CT scanning machines, because that directly relates to the hospital's revenue as opposed to investing in a newer water heater, for example. And just the general feedback that we received was, if the appliance is working and it's not interfering with hospital activities, even if there's a lot of problems and it's extremely old, the facility department would not bother with its overall replacement or retrofit, just to avoid putting up with these challenges. So just to conclude, this was again more of a behavioral market study. And we found out here that hospitals are just extremely complex. A one-size-fits-all solution is not necessarily applicable for all hospitals. A lot of the facility managers we interviewed here had similar experiences and frustrations relating to management and regulatory barriers. A lot of the equipment here that we surveyed in our small sample set was extremely old. But again, cost was a significant barrier for retrofits and replacements. We found that just general energy efficiency education was lacking, and there needs to be a way to spread awareness of energy efficiency programs for gas savings that hospitals can claim. So just going off of that, some recommendations to think about. The first would be, increasing collaboration efforts between HCI, CMS, and the IOUs offering rebates for hospital equipment. And an example would be, HCI could consider expedited permitting or an easier approval process for hospitals seeking to improve energy efficiency. Another reason why it's important to increase the collaborative efforts between these two entities is to ensure that the requirements are not conflicting between the rebate offering and what the regulatory group requires, which has been the case according to a lot of the facility managers that we spoke to. Another recommendation would be increased outreach efforts for hospitals looking to switch to more efficient equipment as opposed to, continuously fixing their older, outdated appliances. They need to know that they can save money in the long run. And, fixing a 60-plus-year-old boiler may not necessarily be the best thing down the line. And another recommendation would be mainly for hospitals, that top-down hospital leadership just needs to align themselves with energy efficiency practices. So an example would be, an education and best practice system among hospital facility leaders. Trainings led by facility and engineering managers would be something to consider, especially to spread awareness of newer equipment across all departments, especially food service, since there seems to be somewhat of a disconnect between the two regions. And so there's just a lot of work to be done internally within the hospitals as well to push best practices for energy savings. And that concludes this presentation for the hospital and use market study. If anyone has any comments or questions, we're happy to take that now. Let me see if there's anything in the chat. I can't really see it on my screen.
I can monitor that for you, Anushka. See, I don't see anything in the chat right now, so if anyone wants to unmute themselves and say anything, you're welcome to do so right now.
And Kate, do you know if the report is published anywhere for this study? I'm not sure if the website is still.
Yeah, so our website is still undergoing some cybersecurity checks right now. I might, if Steven's on, I might refer to Steven if someone can
Yeah,
see that study.
the Cal-ETP site should
drop.
have the project if it's been redacted. I'm logging in right now, so I will give you
Okay.
a specific answer in about 30 seconds.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so if it is on there, feel free to check out the report for more information. And our next event will be on the infrared heaters market. More information will be sent out later.
So just to follow up with everyone, it appears that the project listing is there, but we have not yet well, wait a minute. Yeah, these should be, yeah, we haven't uploaded the report as far as I can tell. So check back in a little bit and we'll probably have them. Not a little bit today, but in a week or two.
Oh, looks like Monica has their hand up. We can go ahead and unmute you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So we did also study or research with hospitals, and according to our research, 42% of US hospitals' energy consumption is on ventilation reheat. So reheat is the single largest energy end use in US hospitals. And we are working on solar thermal technology. So that would be a perfect option to use solar thermal to reduce their heat consumption. So, and the money saved from saving energy could be used for appliances or whatever they would need to buy.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So this was a solar thermal solution for
Yes.
reducing their, okay.
Yeah. And I would certainly welcome any kind of cooperation efforts where we could kind of further go into this opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could definitely try to set up a call to learn more about that technology and the savings that it could offer. So maybe Stephen and I could follow up with you on that.
Thank you very much. I would appreciate it.
I don't see any other questions in the chat coming in. If anyone has any questions, comments, interested in further work with hospitals, you can contact us. This is the contact for our program manager, Davide. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, where we post project updates as well.
Great, thank you, Anushka. I think we can hang on for just another minute for any other last questions, but otherwise, thank you for attending our presentation today. And slides and recording will be distributed in the next couple of days.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you,
Thank
Anushka.
Thanks.
Thank you all for
Thank you.
attending.
Thank you very much.
Kate, really quickly, when you get the contact list, for those who attended this,